Hello. I hope you're here to do engineering contracts and procurement. Is that right? Yes. Beautiful. My name's Colin Duffield. I'm here to guide you through this course over the semester, and at the end of the course I'll go through some objectives and the like. I would hope that you understand the styles of engineering contracts that we might enter into as engineers. Some of you in this room I know have quite a lot of experience, so this sounds trite to you. And if you could just show me who's got, let's say, 10 years experience here. Okay, which countries? Okay, you? 15 years. Magnificent. Must be others here with more than 10 years experience. Oh, there's one. Yeah, good. Contracts, it's how you do business, isn't it? It's what you use every day of the week. Who's here with no experience? Oh. Oh. That means hard work for you, okay? Because it means that in your daily business, you're yet to open the front cover of what a contract looks like, probably. You're yet to understand some of the funny terms and phrases that we use. So I'll turn this down a little bit. So if you've read the discussion or the announcement board of the LMS, who's done that? Because I sent most of you an email if you were enrolled in time, and I would have said, as background reading, if you're starting from a low base, please have a look at the most simple, not the most simple, but the smallest, the thinnest version of the general conditions of contract that are put out by way of Australian standards. So that was the AS 4000 document. So those of you who practice all of the time, the AS 4000 document in principle is no different to FIDIC. In principle is no different to the new engineering contract out of UK. In principle actually holds the same common law features as you'll find in jurisdictions where they're administrative in nature, like America, France, whereas in Australia we tend to be premised around law of tort. So we'll get to know those things. So those of you with no experience, where did you come from? Who's from Australia? No one? Gosh, come on. You got to play in this subject. Some of you have already said, oh, do we record this subject? Subcolon, dot point, item 1, 2, submask 3, I mightn't have to come. Word of caution. This subject will move across a lot of content, much of which is, in my view, quite subtle. So if you rely upon this, which is a very full form of communication, history would show you'll miss the subtleties. You'll miss some jokes too, because one of the guest speakers we've got coming in, John McMullen, who's a specialist construction solicitor, has a habit of telling jokes. So you've got to get onto the wavelength. You're allowed to laugh, you know, you're allowed to have a bit of fun. But if you're not here, all you'll hear are things like grunts, and you'll have no idea of the context, okay? Because it won't be on the board, and all you'll hear on the microphone is grunts, and you'll say, what was that about? So you have to be here to get it. There are usually other parts of the subjects that we will turn the microphone off for and talk about some real live issues, like commercial cases that might be before the courts, which you're not allowed to talk about. So we're not allowed to put it on the microphone. But of course, from where you sit, if you really want to learn, you want to know what's happening today, not what happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago, which is what's in the textbooks. You'll only get it if you come, okay? So those of you who have been asking, oh, this is optional, isn't it? Up to you, but history would show if you don't come, you put yourself at a great disadvantage. So what we hope that you'll get, that you'll know the meaning of contractual documents. And as John McMullen will start to talk to you, that means much more than simply the general conditions of contract. We'll start to talk risks, and you can see I'm using construction projects as my pseudonym for what we're doing in this course. You can substitute construction for manufacturing. There really is no difference. you could, and John will talk to you about, shorter form contracts for the work of consultants. We'll talk about other forms of contract whereby you go into partnerships or partnering agreements, which you might in fact use for work items like offshore oil platforms and the like, where typically you engage in a very large way with people of excellence as opposed to a small way with many providers. So different ways of getting to it. We'll talk about that. Then you see we slip into things like tendering, costs, and where's G? Where's G gone? Come on. G's our senior tutor. And you're going to find out that in this course, you actually get the opportunity to run a construction company as if you are the CEO for 2 years. So you go into teams, you battle out, you fight, you compete, you bid for work, you make money, you go broke. It all happens. So for those of you with no experience, this means we're stepping you up a few plates beyond where you'll see immediately. For those of you with maybe 10 years experience, you'll probably become fascinated with the connection between the game, the bidding for work, and then the control of shareholders, the raising of debt and equity, the way that you have to trade off how much money you have to develop your business versus how much money you have to keep people happy. It sounds a long way removed from being an engineer. It's actually running a business. Engineering is a business. I make no bones about that. So we'll do that. How long does it take? About 8 sessions, is that right? Yes. Eight live bids, which means that this little game is run under licence with a, what's Mike call himself? Game simulator or the game master or what? The Grand Poobah, I don't care what we call him. But Mike orchestrates from UK. The same game is taken by many of the leading consulting and construction companies around the world. This is how they train their staff. And in fact, the game we run, they've just finished, so you can compare your performance at the end of the semester with what they've done. And with Jay's help, we've found in the past that you usually finished in the top third of all of that industry. That's about right, isn't it? Close. Which means that with the help of your tutors, and we do break the class into smaller groups so you get tutors and the like. David's joined us today. David, just jump up, you can get introduced. I think we've got 7 tutors working with us this year. So, you know, we've got big tribes of people, and each of the tutors have all played the game. They've all gone through the anguish of having to bid for work and having somebody else undercut them. They've all gone through the anguish of thinking they've got the perfect strategy to make lots of money, only to find that the game master pulls a stunt like global financial crisis. I think he's got Brexit in this year's. So he's going to pull some stunts, okay? Guaranteed. Don't think the game just stays like this. It's real life. In fact, the game is based on Balfour Beatty's actual construction processes. Balfour Beatty is one of the large Tier 1 constructors in the UK. And Balfour Beatty worked with Mike and they've replicated their actual processes. So it's pretty close to real, okay? And so that's what we're doing. As part of preparation for the game, Jay will say you have to get into groups, 5 or 6 maybe, 5, maybe 5 people. On Friday, she will start to say, come on, in the groups please, come on, register, come on. And of course, that's not just to try to jolly you along, but as a part of the exercise, the first few weeks of the game allows you to trial with no penalty to see how good you are, to test if you can actually learn some things. So what do you have, 3 weeks of trial? Yes. Something like that? So 3 weeks where you can go into the software, make a bid. Mike Fletcher, as the game master, will say, oh, you could have done this, you actually made a mistake there, and he'll actually help you and coach you and get you through the system. So the more trials you do, guaranteed, the better off your game performance will be. So the earlier you start, the better off you are. So if you don't know what some terms are, we'll talk to you on Friday, is that right? We'll give you a bit of a kickstart. And then, David, is it right that last year you played the game?
Yes, yes, it is. Right.
And he had such a great strategy, he was too conservative and didn't win. We've got a funny Australian saying, no risk, no reward. No guts, no glory. And I could keep going on with some Australian sayings and they get more and more dirty, I suppose, so I'll stop there. But I could. And of course, in the contracting game, in the room here, who thinks they're prepared to have a go at some things? Pretty much a risk taker. You know, you can do it in sport. Who likes having a go at the biggest, hardest whatever? Or who's a little bit timid and stands back and waits to see what's going on? David, you're a little bit timid, big boy.
Yes, yes.
If you're going to win the game,
you've got to be somewhat aggressive. You're going to learn a lot. Whatever happens, you're going to learn a lot.
we hope.
You will. You will.
And so,
fantastic course.
So then the last part. What if the project doesn't work out as you had thought? What remedies do you have? How could you recover your position? If something hasn't worked and then you think it's somebody else's fault, how do you recover? What does it cost to recover? What techniques can you put in place? How do you conduct yourself to optimise your commercial return? We'll talk about such matters. We might even have a bit of fun with that as well. We'll do a major assignment during the subject. Let me see if it can put here. No, that's the syllabus. We'll get to that in a minute. I'll get that. So you do an exam. It's 2 hours. I guarantee it'll be easy for your tutors and it will seem incredibly long to most of you. That's how it will be. And so come to the lectures. We will try to emphasise what we think is really, really critical to the course. And of course, we won't be tricking you when it comes to exams. What you see is what you'll get. But of course, you have to be participating to get it. The assignment is going to ask you to plan how you will organise, resource and submit a tender. And I've been told off for making it too hard. Usually the assignment, and this one will be no different, I ask you to communicate to the boss of your company. I ask you to communicate internally within your company as to whether you choose to tender for a parcel of work or not. Of course, that's a major decision for a provider of work. You tender for the wrong job, you'll take a job with too much risk that you don't have the expertise to do, maybe where the client doesn't understand what they're asking of you, and you'll be in tears. You tender for the right job, you'll do a wonderful job, you'll make good money, your client will love you, and the facilities and the amenity that you leave around you will be spectacular. And I, for one, know which one I'd prefer to do. Oh, Felix has joined us. Felix, come on. So Dr. Felix Hui is going to help in tutoring one of these parts, and so you'll find people come and stand before you with different backgrounds. So Felix stands here with a mechanical engineering background. I stand here with, first of all, a civil engineering background overlaid by I don't know what, probably finance, probably economics, probably decision-making and front-end politics. David stands here. Come on, David, you can jump up again. As a geographer. Huh? Jay stands here as a transport modeller. Huh? How come we can deliver this one subject to you? How does that work? Everybody does the same contracts. Everybody has to participate. That's how it works, isn't it, Felix? Right. Felix used to work for Toyota. Do you think they use contracts? Or do they just employ their own staff? They make the cars totally in their own factory, don't they? Is that right? Nonsense. They make the cars all around the world in everybody else's factory and then put them together and put their badge on it. And sometimes they even take someone else's car and put their badge on it anyway. Is that right, Felix? Yes, it's tricky, isn't it? You'll complain, so I've got to give you feedback on what other courses who've done this say. You will complain. You will say, the Ingenuity game took more than 5% of my time. And it will. But I won't lecture you on how to tender or how to price or how to... I expect that through the game you learn that. So it's effectively a learning tool as well as an assessment tool. You'll get your marks pretty easily by playing the game. Shh, I shouldn't have said that, should I, Jay? But you will. Oh no, I'll go back here. So in the game, if you finish the game, you'll get 5%. That's pretty good, isn't it? If you go broke, you'll be in trouble. And we'll have winners and losers. So we have a league table. So if you look up Ingenuity competition using Google, or Ingenuity Comp, I think Mike calls it, you'll see that he has league tables, and every week you can see how you ranked, how the other teams have performed, how you performed, and at the end of the day, the person who's made the most money will be deemed number one. And I'm pretty sure I give you a bonus of 3 marks, which is money for jam. Second, you can get 2, third, you'll get 1, otherwise you get 5. So if you're in the winning squad, you can increase your lot. In fact, you can get in this subject 103%. That's pretty good, isn't it? I haven't seen it yet, but maybe you'll be the first. All right. So people always complain 5% is not enough. Well, if you get the bonus, it starts to look okay. If you think there's a lot of learning in behind it, it probably is okay. Mondays we'll do the bulk of the lectures. Some of you have been asking questions about how you read your timetable for Fridays. Is that right? That's because we interleave group sessions like this with small group sessions at the same time slot. So if I go to the LMS, which you should be starting to become familiar with. So there's the LMS. If I go to the subject schedule here, I can see things in red that you can't see, so don't get tricked. If I make it bigger so you can see it. Big, 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 big. So you'll see here we've got 7 different tutorials, but they're all at the same time. So sometimes you're in this big room like this Friday. So if you see in this schedule, what's my pointer? There it is. There. This week, Friday the 28th of July, we're in here because Jay is going to take you through how to start the software, how to make it work, what are the funny features, and it's just more sensible that we're together so everyone gets the same information. And then we start to break into smaller groups and we start to go through the content. Down the lectures you'll see, running down here, we've got different presenters and the topics start changing from the principles of engineering, then into forms of contract, some of the conditions of contract, how you then deal with matters like time, cost and quality, how you deal with contractual claims. How do you put in a variation? What is a variation? How do you justify a variation? We actually get one of the big claims consulting companies come in and run through some of the analytical approaches they take. So hopefully you don't have to do that. But unfortunately for you, you probably will. Those of you with 10 years experience, have you ever had to make a claim for a variation? Oh yes, they say. That's never fun, you know, because you know you're upsetting somebody. But if someone asks you to do a lot of work that you haven't been paid for, sometimes that's the only way that you can go about it. So that's life. So how do you do it properly? How do you justify it? How do you demonstrate it with evidence such that somebody ultimately says, oh, yes, I can see what you're saying, and give you a tick. So we'll try to teach you through those things. Payments, variations, like getting paid is a good thing. Up here. How do you evaluate tenders? How do you know you've got the right one? How do you know you've got a winner? So in this subject we flip from, I'm going to say, client and provider. So if you're a consultant, are you a client or a provider? You provide services. If I'm a big construction company, am I a client or a provider? Typically, I do lots of work. But then if you've got that same contractor who's engaging smaller people, like my example with Felix before, that same contractor could, in respect to their relationship with that other group, actually be the client to the smaller group being the provider. So people change hats as they go through these arrangements, and you need to put yourself in the shoes of what you're actually saying. And down right near the end of the subject, down here somewhere, whoops, we'll review the subject and we'll give you all the tips you need, and if you listen very carefully, you usually don't do too badly. That's where we're going. Does that make sense? So I'm working through these things. So I've gone to LMS, that's where I am. Does anyone need help to know how to get to LMS? Log in, your subject should come up, you should be able to see the course, the lecture notes, those sorts of things. Welcome. I've welcomed you. My tutors who have come today have welcomed you. Expectations. I've been talking about my expectations, like that you come to class, like that you participate, like that you have a bit of fun. They're my expectations. I have another expectation. I hope you don't mind. That we treat each other with respect. Is that okay? And what does that mean? It means come on time. If we've got guest lecturers, you're polite to them. You know, they might be fiddling around. You might even help them a little bit. You know, all of those sorts of things. But then no doubt you have expectations. What are your expectations? Because myself and our tutors will try to work with you with your expectations. So what are your expectations? That you work hard? Is that an expectation? That we come and give you lectures when we say? Do you think we should do that? Do you think that's an expectation? What else?
Give the exam.
We give you the exam?
Give the exam.
Oh, easy. No. Do you know... Oh, I shouldn't say this. I will say this. So it's feedback, isn't it? Invariably, people in this subject say, what a horrible, hard exam. Hard subject. Then they write to me 2-3 years later, literally, thank you so much for that subject. It's 90% of what I've done in my employment since I've had a job. Thank you so much. I'm always pulling the notes out. That's what they say. And I'd say every year I'd get probably a dozen of those from past students. So it won't be easy, but hopefully it's useful, okay? Is that all right? Hopefully we help you, and we're not trying to trick you. So if that makes it easier, we'll do our best, okay? Any other expectations? Please.
Yeah, it's more like a question. We've talked about tendering, bidding, stuff. Are we going to get some new skills in negotiation, for example, in how to manage a negotiation with a contractor, with a supplier, depending on the...
We're not giving you explicit practice classes in negotiation, albeit that John McMullen, the solicitor, and myself will run through some examples of how you start to approach and establish the frameworks and the strategies behind negotiating. So, you know, there's a level at which we won't go the whole way. You know, maybe one day you'll do an MBA and you'll do the negotiations or other things to that level, but we'll get you started, yeah. Is that okay? All right. So we have expectations, you have expectations, let us know. The subject I've been talking to you about, let's finish these couple of slides, if I can get those, and then we'll get into something to do with contracts. So here's where I was. So the exercises, you can see how it incorporates in and around, and the lectures primarily on Mondays, but sometimes on the Friday. Key lectures, Jay, on the Friday. Yourself with the how do you do the class. We have expert Q&A sessions with both John McMullen and Jeff Duck. So if you're not sure how to evaluate a tender, we'll have a Q&A session directly where we'll go through it in detail. We'll have one of the big Tier 1 Civil Contractors, WBHO, which is a South African-owned Australian company, is going to come in and share real live tender documents with you, which is usually a bit of fun. We have the presentations of the awards and we have the feedback session in this lecture format. The rest are in small groups. Watch the LMS. Contracts go across all your project management type work, so other subjects linked to it, of course. I've said starting resources, and then students invariably tell me, I expect you to read too much. Some students tell me 20 pages is too much. I'm probably thinking more like 20 times 20. Maybe even more than that. But I'm thinking that you need to learn how to read technical documents with purpose, which means you don't necessarily read every word, but you read the sections that you require. So if I was reading, say, the general conditions of contract, do you know what I'd do for a start? I'd look at the table of contents, which is only a couple of pages, get a feel for what's in this document. Then I might go and have a look at the definition of terms. What does that word really mean in the context of this? And if I can give you one trick, solicitors don't think like us engineers. Solicitors write words that read sometimes convolutedly. They try to write clearly, but invariably they write using the lexicon of their definition of terms. So if you don't read their definition of terms, you won't know what they mean by even a simple word like project, because they will define what project for them means, and then through the document, every time you see project, it's actually their definition, not what you thought it was. So first trick with reading the legal documents is understand the context and then understand the terms. And that's quite different to engineering. You know, in engineering, you get taught the principles of engineering mechanics, you get taught the principles of materials, the principles of how it all comes together. Is that right? And then you use your logic and you get a lovely answer. In this, because it's legal, what's the interpretation? How am I supposed to, by precedents and other things, impose and interpret that interpretation? And then what does it do to me? A little bit different. So maybe don't read all of these right at the moment, but I did give you the handbook. So HB 140 2000 in that little note. If you have a look at that, it will start to give you some, effectively like a textbook, as to what do the terms mean. That might be a step too far, but if you're struggling to know what, say, I'm saying or what John's saying, that's one avenue. If you're struggling to know what John's saying, he's in fact longhand written all his lecture notes out and they're actually on the web page. So when he starts talking to you about estoppel, restitution, you can go and look it up in his notes, it's all there. He tracks it through for you, which is not a bad thing. All right. So these standard form contracts that I just had up, like AS 4000, AS 2124, AS 4300, to me they mean a whole lot of things. To you, except those who are practicing engineers, probably means nothing. So what's AS 4300 mean to you? And he put his head down because it means nothing. Oh, that's okay. It means that you've got design and construct, or design and manufacture put together. So it's a way of doing business. So Andrew Bell in our law faculty is doing his PhD at the moment, and part of his PhD he's been looking at what standard forms are used in Australia and to what extent are they used. So standard forms are where someone says, on the shelf, here's a contract, let's use it for consistency. When you get to really large projects, you don't pull it off the shelf. You go and get your solicitors and say, I've got this problem, can we write it up, please? So you get to some point in your projects where you don't use standard forms. So standard forms, you'll see here. In blue is the standard form contract. The grey is not a standard form contract. So very small projects, pretty much everyone uses standard form. Okay? So if you're doing small jobs, don't get a solicitor to draft from scratch, just use standard form. You'll see as I go beyond that though, the percentage changes, the 100 to 500 million project, standard form's still used quite a lot. 2/3 of them are done on standard form contracts. But you go to the really large projects and few would be standard form. And even where it says standard form, they're standard form with quite a number of amendments to the standard form. So in the standard form contract, the contract's written standard, and then they have what they call Annexure Part A, which spells out the specifics, like how much insurance do you need, the actual number, how long does somebody have to take to respond to questions. It has a number of days. And so that's in Annexure Part A. Annexure Part B will have terms and or conditions that have changed from what's in the main standard document. So you could guarantee that here in the greater than 500 million, even if they've used standard form, they've got lots of Annexure Part Bs with specials in them. So they've made it their own by just changing that up. Telstra, which you know is a telco here in Australia, was using AS4000. AS4000 has, 90 pages, 100 pages? And their special conditions to that AS4000 sum to 150 pages. It's hardly standard form. Totally rewritten, effectively. So you'll see quite a lot are used. And what sort of standard forms do we use? Let's have a look. Oh, the sectors by which we use them. So building, residential buildings, commercial buildings, infrastructure projects, private sector infrastructure projects like the mining companies, public sector. So there's a fair smattering across there. Now the styles of contracts. So the ones on the left clearly used the most. AS 4300. What's that? You can tell me what that is now. What's that? Design and construct. Okay, that's the one that's used the most in Australia. If I go to America, do you know what they think about that style of doing business? Too risky. Far too risky. How could we ever let somebody build something and they designed it as well? So in America, they think that's incredibly risky. In Australia, we think that's the only thing we can do. Why is that? Risk. In Australia, clients typically want to give as much risk to the providers as they can get away with, so somebody else is responsible. So then have a look at the next one. AS4000. What's that? Procure only. So no design, just the procure only. So there's quite a lot of that. 2124, 1992. That's the procure only from 1992, and we still use it. Hang on. How can you use a standard that's old? 1992 and we still use it. How does that work? Because standards in the contractual sense aren't like your technical standards where you have new scientific knowledge that says it has to be this way, so therefore we make the standard new. It's actually an agreement. So in those different documents you'll find that the risk allocation, the profile of the clauses, who's responsible, changes a little bit. So the AS2124 is more a client document than AS4000. AS4000 is a bit fairer to the person doing the work, and so they're different outcomes, different allocations of risk. That's interesting. Come across the, which one? Oh, I jump on. FIDIC. So in Australia we use FIDIC, so that's out of the engineers in Switzerland, the peak body there, and their contracts are primarily the same as the Australian ones. Similar law in behind them. They used to have the blue book, the green book and the yellow book. One was for electrical engineering, one was for mechanical and one was for civil. And the only difference was the colour of the cover. But they had the three books. The other one that you'll hear something about from time to time is the NEC3, which is right down at the end there. So that's the new engineering contract out of UK. Works on the same legal basis as everything we talk about in this course, except they've developed a suite of mix and match type arrangements. How do you want to set up your contract? Do you want it to be a client emphasised document or a fair document? How do you want to pay? Do you want it to be pay as you go, or do you want a lump sum price? And so in that document, effectively, they let you choose and mix and match different modules to get to the answer. And then in Australia we have special defence contracts. Great, got to have some specials. Where they're used, so you'll see here, FITICs are typically used on the really big projects in Australia. Why would that be the case? Why do you think when you get really big projects you start to see the Swiss contracts come out of the jar? Who's likely to do the really biggest projects? International companies. International companies who are familiar with the international contracts, so therefore you make their life easy by using an international contract even though it's much the same as the Australian one. Just makes them more comfortable. Why would you want to make your contractor more comfortable? You hope they'll give you a cheaper price by not being scared by the deal. That's what you hope for. So you try to make your relationship as smooth, easy, clear, transparent, because if someone's not scared, they give you a sharper price. That's the way we do it. It's funny, isn't it? So we work together on all these deals. Do you know, David, I think that's interesting. You know, when I went to uni, it was almost like the solicitor would come in and say, we work in an adversarial environment. It's us and them. Do you know if I went to the law faculty today, do you know what they'd say to you? We solicitors add value by being adversarial. Don't be scared of a fight. Come on, let's have a go. Do you know what we say in engineering? If you don't work together, you get a poor outcome. So we're different. Understand we fundamentally start from different places. You read the paper every day, someone's suing, litigating. Why are they doing that? Because they've got their gloves off and they're having a fight and it's us and them. Sometimes we fight in engineering. More typically we realise that we'll all lose if we do that and we're better off collectively getting solutions. So you've been trained to solve problems, correct? You've been trained to logically think through to get to an agreeable solution, is that right? Well, that's what we would like to impose in the contractual sense, but understand solicitors don't start from the same place. David, what does that mean if I engage a solicitor to help me with my contracts? Do I let them just tell me what to do because they know best, they're the lawyers? Or do I tell them sometimes? Do I tell them as a project person, this is what I want? This is the outcome I want to achieve. And you know what? I'll have a fight with my own solicitor because they won't agree with me. Guaranteed. Do you know who always wins that fight? Because I tell them. And do you know where you end up? In a better place. That's how it works. You don't tell them, you'll end up in a worse place. How many forms of contract are amended? I've had that discussion, so I've told you that. Here's the little game we're going to play. You're going to go through some of this on Friday, aren't you? So we're playing the little game. I'm just going to give you the first page. You can read the other ones and come on Friday. When we say that you're effectively running a company for 2 years, that means you bid and get feedback on your performance every 3 months. And so 8 bids times 3 months, 2 years. That's how it works. So you make decisions about distributing profits, raising debt every 3 months. Is that okay? Should be okay. So that's my introduction. Now I want to, with your permission, go to some content. But before I go to content, I want to ask you a question. Who's got lectures immediately after this? Oh, bad luck for you. Who then wants to have a break right now for 5 or 10 minutes and then run through pretty much to the death knell? Or who wants to push on and wrap up a little bit early? Wrap up a little bit?
Some of us might be going for another lecture after.
I'll still give you the standard 10 minutes changeover, but for those of you who are more under pressure, because it's a long day if you've got lecture after lecture, prefer to wrap up a bit early, have a longer break, or push through and get a bit tired? Push through? Okay, all right. Do you know what I'm doing with you? I'm starting to try to teach you about this art of communicating with your stakeholders. So if I just did one or the other, somebody in this room would be grumpy. But by going through that dialogue, we're all in it together, aren't we? Is that right? No one feels aggrieved, even if you might have preferred to stand up and wiggle around. Contracts are the same. The more you can engage, the more you can communicate, the more you can get agreement on every little step, the more life is lovely. So get in the habit of doing it. It's good. So contracts. These are the reasons we do business with contracts. We gain additional resources, sometimes specialist resources. So I know I've got a consulting engineer down the front here. I bet you go into ventures with other companies from time to time to get more people. Is that right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Yes, we do. You might... Have you been reading the paper about the Melbourne Metro train set? The thing that's out in front of the university going to upset you every day that you're coming to university for the next 5 years? Have you seen that? Do you know the companies who are going to do that are being slowly engaged by contract? And they're being engaged by different contracts. But typically, they're being engaged through some sort of a competitive process. Why do you use a competitive process? To make people fight for the opportunity to give you the best price. Yep.
With highest quality.
Yeah, with highest or appropriate quality. I'd like to think appropriate quality. Highest doesn't mean much to me. Appropriate quality does. Maybe the most value, I like value, but I sometimes find it hard to define what it is. So tell me, what happens if I go to tender for somebody to do work, but then I say, David, if you want to be favoured for this work, you give me a little bit of money and I'll look after you. Just a little bit of money, David. Maybe 5%. 5% of a 100 million job is quite a lot of money. Is that okay?
Yes, where would you like it deposited?
So then I go to Jay and say, Jay, did you want to play with me? If you were the winner, only 10%. And Felix, if you want to play with me, 20%. What have I done? I've excluded these two people from a genuine bidding competition. David's being corrupt and giving me money. The person who ultimately pays absolutely paid 5% too much, but how come David didn't know I was not doing the deal with Felix as well? And so he might have made the deal good for him. So if you do these little things around the side and don't have transparent, fair processes, invariably you pay too much. And if you have systemic problems like that, you pay way too much. To the point where somebody won't even let you have the money and you get nothing. And that's what happens.
And you could go to jail.
Oh, you could go to jail. You should go to jail. So, little slippery slope leads you to incredibly bad outcomes. Play a clean game, transparent to all, fair to all, you end up with cheaper prices and you'll get it every time.
Hold on, what about single sourcing as opposed to competitive sourcing?
So, do you know what single sourcing is? Up the back? What is single sourcing? Someone tell me, up the back there. Come on, don't sit silent, tell me. Single sourced contract. Someone help me, up the back. If I'm the buyer of something, instead of going out to the market and letting anybody come through the front door, I say, Felix, I want you to help me. Felix is smiling already. He says, no problems, I can help you. But Felix, I want the right price. Felix says, of course you'll get the right price. But Felix, I really mean the right price. And what are you going to... Can I do that? Will I sometimes get the right price? I think if I've got a good relationship with me and I've done business before and I check what the going price is, why wouldn't I get a reasonable price? If I'm naive and go to Felix and say, oh, I want you to do something, he says, what do you want? Oh, I don't know yet, but you just charge me what you like, I won't get the right price. So it's not impossible to get the right outcome, and in fact much business is done that way. So whilst the large engineering contracts, particularly from government, tend to use a competitive process, why is that? It's because government officials never want to even have someone whisper or suggest that they might have done that, because they'll be sacked or a government will be brought down. And the way that you protect against that is make it even for all. If I'm, let's say, Shell, and I've got a special deal to do, and I know that there's really only 1 or 2 people in the world who can manufacture for me the standard of equipment that I need, why would I go to public tender and not just go to the people I know that I'm going to give it to because they know how to do it? I'll go to them and say, don't you do me over, else I'm a big player and I'm going to and you'll have a discussion. But why waste everyone's time? You'll find government finds that very difficult to do because it's political. All right? So the contract will define clear accountabilities with legal consequences. What happens if I go into a contract with you? What's your name? Yeah, I'm looking at you. No, lady with the glasses. Yeah. What if I go into a contract with you and say to you, I want to do business with you, and I say, do these things for me, how much will it cost, and you give me a price? Why don't you give me a price? 1 million? That be okay? 1 million? That's okay, isn't it? See, risk taker, I can tell. I got a risk taker, I can tell. 1 million, but you've got to do what I said. What happens if you don't do what I thought you were going to do? Do I pay you the 1 million? No. Do I want you to pay me something because you just mucked me around? Quite possibly. So that's the consequence part. So if you make a commitment to do something and then you don't do it, there's probably going to be a consequence. So don't put your hand up if you don't think you can do it, because there's probably a consequence. That's tricky, isn't it? Do you think if I'm in Australia and I ask you, let's say you're all big manufacturers and constructors. So I'm going to ask you to do a big project for me. If I'm the owner, what's the first thing I say to you? Please give me 10% of what the contract's worth and I can put it in my pocket. How about that? So I want you to do something for me and I'm going to pay you ultimately. But before you start, I say, oh, you give me some money. How about that? That's what we do, typically. That's funny, isn't it? Maybe not so much in consulting, but certainly in the big projects, that's what we do. Because if something falls over midstream, it costs a lot of money to fix it. And so it's like a guarantee. It's like you making a commitment that I'm really serious about this, and the owner wants some assurity that you're really serious, that you're not just making it up. Consequence. That's funny, isn't it? It's a funny system. So how does our law work in Australia? 2 ways. By way of legislation and by way of case law. What's case law? I need somebody to help me. What's your name? What's your name? Me? Yeah. Will. Stand up and say hello to everyone in your class. Like, how often do you get to say hello to your class members?
Everybody?
So what's case law?
I have no idea.
So, hey, do you know if you went to law, they'd say, you remember the case of, I don't know, Walmart versus American government. And out of that case of Walmart versus the American government came this principle of what they do. I was involved in one which was HIH insurance. And in Australia, before HIH insurance went broke, if you took the insurance company to court, you could only ever take the one company and you couldn't join all of the other parties to the deal. So you had to just go with the insurance company to the court. When HIH insurance went into liquidation, and there are all sorts of contracts around with lots of people all wanting to resolve the matters. To resolve it individually made no sense because there wasn't even somebody else on the other side. So the law changed to allow you to have them all joint and severally liable. And so now what happens? When anyone's talking about can I bring other people to the court and go into it as a group, it's based on the HIH case law. Based on that case, the judge said this, now we do that forevermore until something else happens. Thanks, Will. Well done, well, good answer. I reckon we should give him a clap, don't you, hey? That's pretty game, that's good stuff. Legislation. I'm government, I do something in law like you will pay tax, you have to pay tax. It's law, it's in legislation. So we have court system split, federal and state, so different courts at both jurisdictions. We have two arms of law that you get involved in. Criminal law and commercial law. Criminal law, you've seen the movies, haven't you? Judge and jury, that's how it works. Commercial law, no jury, just the judge. Ah, that's different. Criminal law, you get thrown in jail. Commercial law, you pay money. Don't confuse them. We're only talking about money. Unless you do something wrong in respect to occupational health and safety, in which case you can end over here, which we don't want to do. So, you can see there, civil, based on law, only about money, and it's possible to step outside your contract. So the contract, those documents I was talking to you about, specify how we're going to relate. But am I allowed to be dishonest? Even if the contract says you can do whatever you like, am I allowed to be dishonest? Am I allowed to do unconscionable things, like ask you to do more and more and more when the contract didn't actually say it, to the point that I'm damaging you? Am I allowed to do those sorts of things? Why not? The contract that you've entered into probably doesn't say that. Why am I not allowed to do that? Common law. So even though you've entered into a contract, if you start to act in ways and by means that are just untenable, you will fall under the jurisdiction of common law even if your contract said something different. That's funny, isn't it? So you're going to write these agreements, but if you get so smart in writing your agreement, you're unreasonable or deemed to be unreasonable, common law will apply. So common law is something simple like, Felix, as my neighbour, what would be reasonable for me to do to you? Chop your hands off? The contract didn't say I couldn't, but it wouldn't be reasonable, would it? And so common law would throw me in jail if I did such a thing. Not the contract, not the commercial contract. That makes it a little bit tricky because you do have natural justice still applies. Ways we can engage, we've talked a little bit about that, but I love quotations. Do you know what a quotation is? You probably had quite a few of them. Anyone got a mobile phone contract? No? Yes? Everybody. So when you've gone accept, 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 probably on the internet, it's like a quotation. You saw the price and you liked what they were offering and you said, okay. But do you know what you said okay to? All of those terms and conditions that were in fine print on all those pages you didn't bother reading. What's the contract involve? What you said yes to and all of the fine print that you didn't bother reading. That's the contract. In the olden times, like me, quotations used to always be on one page and in very fine print in grey on the back of a carbon copy sheet were all the terms and conditions, and you couldn't read it, but you were signed up to it every time. Minor works contracts, small contracts. Do you enter into a big standard form contract for those? Or might you just have an agreement, like a letter agreement? Would you do that? Would you do work on the basis of a handshake? Would you do that? Oh, of course you would. Why not? Do it all the time. Get yourself in trouble all the time. Can you write something down for me, please? Just write it down. I want you to write this down. In your career, do not ever give somebody engineering advice as a favour. Do not. Do not. Because it's always the advice you give over the phone that comes back and bites your hand off. And I don't mean you don't do a deal for your family or your friends or the people you trust, but someone who rings up and says, oh, I've got this problem, can you just tell me what I should do? And you don't have all the facts, do not answer it. You might say, I'll come and talk to you, or I'll come and see, I'll come explore, but do not just give them the answer, because you'll get bitten. Tendering. What's pre-registration? I like this person. I like you. I think you can do a good job. If you satisfy all these conditions and you want to play with me in the future, why don't you fill in all your conditions for me so I can see them, confirm that you can do the good job, and you'll go on my pre-registered list. Is that okay? And so when I have a job come up, you're on my list, you're on my list, you're on my list. I'll just send you a letter and say, do you want to tender for this work? So I haven't advertised it in the paper. It's not open. It's only you people. Is that a good thing? It's good for me, because I think you can do the work. And so long as I have enough of you, I can get a good price. So I can speed up my time. Dave, do you want any pre-registered lists?
I think I was once, but I don't think I am now.
That's all right. Expression.
So does that include being accepting of standard terms and conditions of the provider?
Can be.
So you've signed up, you've essentially, so you can also speed that up as well.
So if I'm, let's say, the Victorian government, and let's say I'll use the solicitors list if you like. The solicitors available to the Victorian government to do big project work. And of course they are big projects in the main. So they're all of the top solicitors, and going to Stuart's point, they say, give us your price to do work for us. And because you're going to be on our special list, it better be a good price. So give us your special price. So they want a discount, and then that's the price you get for doing the work as specified. But of course, some people get a bit tricky around the fringe of that, and they say, yes, that's the price for the work you've identified, but if you ask me to do this work, I didn't give you that price for that work, that's different. So, you know, some games can start, but yes, certainly you can get tied up with conditions, and that might be valid for 3 years or 5 years or reviewed annually or whatever the arrangements are. But that's like your bread and butter work sometimes. So you do want to be on those lists. But doing it all for discount, well, I'm not sure I want to do that. I might want some special work sometimes, if I was there. Expression of interest, a little bit like my man over here where he pre-registered, but instead of just pre-registering you in advance, I put an ad in the paper and say, who wants to do this job with me? If you want to do it, come and see me, register your interest. Express your interest to me, and then I'll decide who of you that have expressed their interest look worthy enough for me to ask them to price. And we could do direct engagement, no problem. Do you know, as a consultant, we all love direct engagement. Let's be honest. It saves you all of the cost of marketing. You're on a sure thing. Usually got a long-term relationship. Works okay. So in the process, if I go to something like a public-private partnership project, which are very large, involving finance and the like, it's a good one for me to show you because it goes through the process. I've got a stick here, low-tech stick. So the client develops what they're asking for, goes to the market, and the market says, yes, I'd like to play. So this is the market. So client, market. The client shortlists from those people who put their hand up and said they're wanting to do the job. The client would invite that shortlisted group to price up, and of course the client will give more detailed documents as to what that means. The market will actually put a price in for doing that work. The client will then look at that, evaluate what the bidder put in, sometimes go into negotiations in here to clarify terms. Because in today's big contracts, of course, if you've got the terms and conditions document that the client prepared, don't think that the providers always accept it. So whilst the client prepares the documents, here it is, doesn't mean that these people might not accept the risk profile, in which case when they bid, they put conditions back in their bid and they say we don't accept that part, or we want to change that, or we want to discuss that, which is why you might have to go into a period of negotiation to clarify those things and work them out. Normal contracts, you'd sign the contract up at that point. PPP projects, you sign up the contract, but then you still need to get financial close with the banks. And then you do the work. So it's sort of logical, sort of follows some sense, but you can see how you keep flipping between client and provider and who's doing which parts. Please stop me if you've got questions, that's always a good thing. So contracts. How do I know I've got a deal? Best for you to tell me. Who's been to a market? Who's been to a good market, like, in the back blocks of Thailand, or maybe in Bali, or maybe in China? Who's been to a good market? A market where people have a bit of fun, yeah? So what happens? You go into the market and the salesperson usually is very helpful. Oh, this is a lovely thing, this is lovely, oh, you want this. We haven't talked about price yet, have we? Usually in the market you don't talk price, okay? There's no labels telling this how much it is. Then you say, oh, I like that. And the shopkeeper usually says, oh, that's good, that's good. And then you somehow or other say, oh, and how much do you think it's worth? Is that right? And then what comes next? Usually, oh no, you're killing me, your price is wrong, it can't be true, it's too much. Yeah? That's the theatrics of fun, aren't they, hey? And so then you say, oh, it's only worth maybe 10% of what they said, and so you give them a price way down here and they're up here. Is that right? Have you ever done that? You do, don't you? Do you feel embarrassed when you give that price right down there? You don't. You're a tough negotiator. But you know that's not going to be the price, don't you? And so then you get the theatrics from the owner. Oh, my family will never eat. I could never do it. Da, da, da. Yeah? You know the story. Then they come up into the middle ground somewhere, is that right? What are we doing through that process? Nope. Offer and counter offer. The first price, that's the offer they'll sell it to you for. You counter offer a lower figure. Have they accepted that? No. And so you go through the argy-bargy, but it's offer and counter offer. And it's only when you get unconditional acceptance, like, I'll buy that T-shirt for $50. And David said, done. But if I say, I'll buy that T-shirt for $50 on the basis that you give it to me in a different size, have I got a deal? Not unless he's got the different size, because it's not unconditional. Give me the T-shirt in green, please, even though there's only blue ones on the stand. Not unconditional. Has to be something of value. John will talk to you a bit more about that. And you had to intend to enter into a deal, into a contract. And I think John will talk to you about Mrs. Amadio. Dear little Italian lady, couldn't speak English. You wait for the story. Guarantee it's coming. So, let's have a look at some approaches in Australia. Let's maybe look at the regional rail link. Let's have a look at some styles of contract. Sometimes I get you to role play this. I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to rely upon John to talk to you about these forms of contract. So design and construct as per AS 4300. All in together, the designer and the doer come together. Next one down. Public-private partnerships. Effectively, you ask somebody else to do the bulk of the work for you and to pay for it. That's good, isn't it? Not just pay a little 10%, but pay for the whole lot. How good is that? You mean I don't have to pay? Do you think that's right? I don't have to pay? Let's say I did... Have you seen the VCCC cancer clinic on the corner of Grattan Street and Royal Parade? Have you seen that big building on the corner there? You seen that one? That's a PPP. And government haven't yet paid for it. The University of Melbourne's superannuation fund has paid about a third. Big foreign investors have paid about a third. But the government hasn't yet paid for it. They're going to pay for it every quarter, by the quarter, for the next 25 years. So over time, they're going to pay for it. Are they going to pay the full whack? Absolutely. And profit and everything else. So do they get it for free? Nope. They just pay it back over time. Do you know some countries haven't realised that or didn't realise that? Spain, Italy, Portugal, Argentina. What did they do? They did the same sort of deal as the VCCC, and then in their forward booking of accounts said we only have to pay back 1 year's worth because their accounting only went for 1 year. So they would book 4 quarterly payments and think that's all they had to pay, and then they'd look at their budget, woohoo, we can build something else. And so they did. Do you know what happened to them? Sent their countries broke. True story. Do you think that's dumb? You engineers wouldn't be like those accountants, would you? You wouldn't say, commit yourself to paying something back for 25 years, yet only bring 1 year's worth of payment to account, would you? That's what the accountants did. You be smarter. You be engineers. You bring all of the 25 years to account. Alliance contracts, what are they? Alliance contracts, paraphrased, are where I strike the deal on my relationship with you that we can get the job done if we work together, and our premise is about for project good. No blame if something goes wrong. So if something goes wrong, if a risk materialises, instead of going back like solicitors do and getting punching gloves on, I actually say, well, we've got a problem. How do we solve it? How do you think we solve it? How do you think we solve it? Let's get together and let's solve it and do it for the cheapest price. So if you solve it for the cheapest price, ultimately somebody paid the least amount possible to get the outcome. So alliance contracts are all premised on working together to get that cheapest outcome. You might say very light touch of legal arrangements. Managing contractor is effectively like go and hire a company to be your expert to do the job. Early contractor involvement is if I've got a very big job. You have walked out the front of the university and seen the construction work, have you? Have you seen that? Yeah? That's early contractor engagement. They're not building the tunnels, they're not building the stations, they're de-risking the tunnels and stations by moving all of the services such that when they come and dig for the tunnel, they're not hitting power cables, gas mains, etc., etc. So they're de-risking the project by doing early construction. So that contract out there is early construction. Can't remember what it's worth, something like, is it 300 million or something like that? So it's not an insignificant contract, but it's early construction. Traditional, you should know about, that's where the owner designs and someone else builds. Novation form contract, owner starts designing and then novates or gives their partially complete design to somebody else, and then they take on board to finish the design. Right up the back in the blue t-shirt. Why would I do that? Why would I start the design and then give it to somebody else?
Maybe they have a great area of expertise.
Maybe. Or maybe I want them to take responsibility for risk, but I actually wanted to put my flavour on what the design would look like. I wanted to have some say as to what the design would be, but I didn't want to take responsibility for the design being wrong. So I give it commercially to somebody else and hope that they carry all of the risk. So that's novation. Okay. Some lessons. Lesson 1 started in 1990, a long time ago. It's called No Dispute. So this is where Australia started to go away from adversarial contracts to start to do something different, where people started to base themselves by looking at the risks of a contract, and it's based on Abraham's principles of allocate risk to the party who's best able to manage the risk, such that you then get a contract that will work. And so until that time, that wasn't happening. People were just effectively dumping on people. So Abrahamson has something like 7 principles, but everyone just talks about this one. Selection of contractors, fair and equitable, no corruption. Quality of documentation, and you can see it says there required improvement. That's because clients were asking people to do work without being clear as to what they were asking. And it ultimately led to disputes, to fights, to arguments. I thought you meant this. Oh, no, I thought you meant that. I was quite sure I said that. No, you didn't say anything. And they have a fight. It's not helpful. So that document really set a change event for Australia. Then there was a bit of commercial reality that people said, well, if we're going to work together, they formed this concept called partnering. And partnering was like a shake, shake, shake trust deal after the contract had been signed. And so, Felix, let's sign that contract, $1 million, no problems. Next day, Felix, we can work together. Let's say we say we'll have no accidents on the site, on the job. Is that okay? You agree? I agree. No, I don't want to hurt somebody. Do you? No, he agreed. Okay. So we'd go through a list of things like that, and we'd say, we agree we don't want accidents. We agree that we're going to get the job done quickly. We agree, we agree. And that would be a partnering agreement. We'd sign it off. Do you know what happened? There was an accident. Or the job did take longer. And do you know what happened? I didn't go to the partnering agreement and say, Felix, we agreed. I went back to my contractor and said, you bastard, you did that. So it fell apart. Okay? And sometimes people kept transferring all of the risk even though they said they were going to use Abraham's principles. Do you think that would happen? It happens. So then 1990, 2000, private finances started, and the first of these was the Sydney Harbour Tunnel project. And so they were delivered by way of BOOT or BOOT type projects. A lot of roads, so CityLink Road was one of those that you see there, some water treatment plants. Even the Sydney Olympics was trying to do it that way. In fact, at that time, the governments got so excited about free money that they thought they could do everything using this technique. And have a look on the second screen. Projects that did not go to the market or projects that did not proceed after they went to the market were massive. So everybody was trying to get a deal done using somebody else's money without thinking it through, and all it did is cost everybody a lot of money with projects that didn't proceed. So that wasn't much good. Then if we keep going on, government decided that maybe if it actually listens to the market and works with people and develops something more sensible, that they could possibly achieve better outcomes, and that's where they started to get today's public-private partnerships like the VCCC. You can see there's lots of social infrastructure, IT projects, transport projects, water projects, and at least in Victoria, if someone starts one of those these days, other than the East-West Tunnel, which got truncated for political reasons, they go ahead. You know, so people have thought them through well enough that they tend to proceed. Alliance projects got very, very keen in the 2000s. And this chart's telling in that this is, the blue line is private sector doing their work by way of alliances, and the red graph is government doing its work by alliances. You'll see that alliances started with the private sector, and it was principally on projects where the risks were so large that people couldn't honestly price them, so you'd all go in together and say, we understand this is really risky. So Wandoo, Eastern Spara, offshore platforms off Western Australia were some of the early ones. What happened here? Why did government get so keen on using alliances? Got resources, didn't have to think through the work. Everyone worked together, got the outcome. But you know what was really happening? Clients were getting the works that they couldn't get approved through normal processes just done as if they were printing money. So they started spending money by just doing work. And the worst offenders were in Queensland, where they had a mining boom and couldn't get resources. So when we do it this way, if I do one-on-one treaty with somebody and say, come in, we'll do an alliance, and then instead of working with them in a true alliance, they basically just let the other party do whatever. All very easy, but all very expensive. And in fact, that led to this report which transformed the industry and changed the way we do alliances to get more commercial reality into them. So more recent years, these are road projects, but in terms of the contracts, PPPs, yeah, they happen in big lumpy amounts. They don't happen all the time. That one was Eastlink. Design and construct projects, which are standard form contracts, yeah, they happen. Alliances, yes, they happen. All of the other forms of contract that I've whispered about happen, but not very often. So little bits and pieces. The early contractor, the managing contractor and the like. So your delivery options, if I go for lowest cost tendering, so you give me the best, the cheapest price, typically it's traditional contracting. What comes with best, cheapest price? Low quality. If all you do is drive your selection of people on the basis of price, at some point you drive the market to give you the worst quality product you could get. Going out to the right, if you give somebody full responsibility to do something, they'll take full responsibility, but you better be careful that you know what you're asking for, because you've transferred an enormous amount of risk to them. So get it wrong, not be clear, you'll have a very sad day. And in between there are the other arrangements. Seen the standard form contracts, FIDIC style contracts I've mentioned to you. You see down the bottom there, the older forms, the red book, the yellow book and the like. So now FIDIC has gone to something a little more akin to the new engineering contract, where you can actually mix and match. So plant, turnkey projects, which means that you basically get the contractor on board, say you finish it, when it's all finished I'll come and open the front door and use it. Well, it usually doesn't work quite that easily, but that's what the concept is. So lots of options within FIDIC. Hopefully the new engineering contracts here. So here, these are these mix and match items that you can start to do, the payment options and the like. This is still the new engineering contract, so what sort of deal have you got? So have a look down the options. Price contract with a schedule. And you'll start to realise that the risk profile of all these change. So depending on what you've got or what you want, you change the commercial arrangement, you change the risk profile, you change who's responsible for what. Priced with a bill of quantities. So what's a bill of quantities? Where I'd list and say, think of a hotel building. If I designed a hotel building, and let's say it had 200 tenantable rooms, I could go and count every door in that building. Let's say the hotel's got a room to the hotel room, bathroom door, X doors on the wardrobes. I could go and count every door, every window, every fitment. That would be my bill of quantities. Then if I asked somebody to price my contract, they'd price per door on the basis that my hotel had 1,000 doors. If I changed my hotel design and had 1,500 doors, does my price change? Yeah, because it's a bill of quantity, so they get paid based on the real quantity. Target contract. We're going to do it in this time for this amount of money. If I do it quicker, I might have incentives. If it takes longer, there'll be penalties. Cost reimbursable. What's that one? Who's got the risk in cost reimbursable? Owner or doer? Owner. Because whatever it costs, they reimburse you and put a little bit of margin, your pre-agreed profits or something else. Is that good, Felix? Would you like that one?
Depends on which side you're on.
If you have struck your arrangements appropriately at the start and you're happy to hang around, usually that's a pretty good deal. Is there any motivation in such a deal to finish quickly? No, the more work you do, the more money you make. So just staff up and put more people on it and make more money. So clients who do that are usually desperate or don't know what they want and want lots of flexibility. But they might do it. Term contracts, so you can see here, the arrangements, the timing, the payments all change. John will talk to you about more of that. So the forms of contract, we've talked a little bit about that, but the payment mechanisms, cost plus, it's like the reimbursable contract, whatever it takes is what I paid. Fixed price, you tell me what it's going to cost and that's all you get. That's like the market example, you know, you barter off till you get to the t-shirt, then you won't pay any more. It's the same. Schedule of rates, you pay on the basis of doing an item of work. So in a schedule of rates contract, if your contract's got the combination of volume times price per unit, in a schedule of rates contract, the contractor bids the dollars per unit of work, and then based on measurement of the volume is what you get paid. Because that's so uncertain, usually it's between limits, and so you'd set some limits such that people know pretty much in what zone you're in, because if you go outside those limits, sometimes you change how you actually do your work. Guaranteed maximum price, what does that sound like? Put a guarantee, of course. So if I bid a fixed price, sorry, it's not good. And if there's dollars. Sometimes you'll see this often in building projects because people more or less know how much a building costs. So rather than leave yourself exposed to lots of variations, you'll often say, bid me a price for my building and then give me a second price which you guarantee that you won't exceed, regardless of whatever else happens. So if the price of steel goes up, if you change the fitments for some reason, if there are little variations in the sort of building that's going on, you cap your overall arrangements. Is that fair? Well, if you really know your business pretty well and you know that this is really your price, but there's always a few things that change. Over time you get to know how much changes more or less in something like a building, so you can probably fix that pretty well. And that's what some people will do. Why would someone do that? What happens if you do this? Fixed price with a guaranteed maximum. What happens to the final price? Usually approaches the guaranteed maximum, usually, because people start putting things in until they get up towards it. Then they get told you're getting near the guaranteed maximum, stop doing it please. But you usually pay for that. Do you think that would be something that, say, the University of Melbourne would like to do for its buildings? If I was cruel and said the University of Melbourne's not great at building buildings, but it knows it wants lots of them, so it's got lots of people who want to build buildings for it, guaranteed maximum price might allow the system to know how much it will pay, ultimately. So it's not a bad thing. So clients like the university probably like that system because they get confidence that they're not going to pay more, they're not going to be exposed to lots of variations. They've got a price that it won't go beyond. Incentive schemes, I could go going on, but I shan't. I won't go through these. I'll let John take you through those. You can look at those later. The ways by which we communicate the different models. Cost sharing arrangements, commercial alliances, gain share mechanisms. You'll get to know those things. But let's have a look at this and we'll finish on this as a little example. So the Regional Rail Link project was the first rail project that Victoria did of large scale that seemed to work out okay. I shouldn't say that, should I, David? It's not very fair to the people involved. But it was a new railway line going from Southern Cross Railway Station down past Werribee that would separate country train lines totally from the metropolitan system. And so in arranging that work, some of the work, like in and around the city of Melbourne, was very, very busy with the metropolitan trains. You don't get very much access to do work. Some of it was running alongside of existing train lines that went out to the western suburbs. This green part actually went through farmland, so there was nothing there, and then this part joined back into the existing train system. So in looking at the risk profile there, the people involved decided that there were different mechanisms to try to optimise the risk allocation. So the contracts that they did in here, because there were existing franchises and an existing PPP with the Southern Cross Station, they decided to do that as an extension to the Metro franchise. So the people who run the trains every day, they said, you just do that for us, pretty much cost plus. So, okay, not too commercial, but probably saves you a lot of fights in terms of you stop me getting access to the metropolitan trains, you stop my trains, or I couldn't do the... So you avoided all of that argument by just letting them do it. This part here, which is a little bit ugly, they did it as an alliance. So companies, come and work with us. We know it's a bit difficult. We'll all work together and we won't blame each other, but we'll have incentive mechanisms. So what are they going to do the next part as? Here. Well, they actually didn't do it. They took it out of the job, so I'm tricking you. This part that was going through the paddocks, design and construct, you know. Go and build us a train line. You take full responsibility. And the little bit at the end there, where you're joining back into the trains, what would you think the concept would be there? Is this little part like that part? No, one's through a paddock, one's joining up with existing trains. Or is this part here like this part? Probably a little bit like that red part. Do you know which part of that whole job gave them grief? That part. It's not that hard, is it? Gave them grief because their contracting mechanism set people up where they didn't have full control of their work. The Abrahamson risk allocation wasn't actually done in a balanced way, was actually done for commercial reasons. Doesn't surprise me that that's the part that gave them grief. I think that's funny, David. Not funny, not ha-ha funny, but they should have learned. And they did the rail signalling, which went from here all over everything by an alliance, because it was going to interrupt all of the trains. It was going to have to work with every other contract. So to do it on a relationship basis probably makes some sense, and that's what they did. So the outcomes, you know, it appeared to work. The brownfields projects were dominated by alliances. They found out that around Southern Cross Station that the PPP contract, whilst people would say they're generally not very flexible, actually could be as flexible as you wanted so long as you're prepared to price. And the hard money contracts, you know, fixed price, lump sum, take full responsibility, B and C, worked where the contractor could actually get on and do the work themselves without being interfered with by somebody else. So, if I conclude, so the commercial arrangements continue to evolve such that the parties try to optimise their outcomes. Transfer of risk to some other party can work, but do so with your eyes open. And alliance contracts are also often appropriate, particularly if you've got brownfields type work or those things. I'm going to leave it there, but from this session you'll see I've gone across the different forms of contract quite quickly. John McMullen will come back over that, so don't worry if you're not familiar with it. In terms of the commercial arrangements, you'll see that there are many and they are mix and match. understand that we'll probably talk mainly about Australian contract forms, but hopefully you can see from what I've gone through that legally and conceptually they're not different really to what happens internationally. It's just easier for us to stick with the one. So I'll leave it there. Welcome to the program. Certainly Friday we'll go into groups and we'll go from there. Okay? Thank you. Superintendent we'll talk more about, but in that form of contract is a bit like the referee in a game of soccer. So typically it's nominated by the owner, but that person's responsibility is to be fair to both parties in terms of the contract. So it often is not an employee of the owner who does it.
When we say that the owner designs, do we say that the owner goes to the designer's office?
If the owner is doing the design, they're approving, agreeing, giving ideas. So they might get a consultant to help them do the design, but they're writing the scope of work for the consultant. They're approving or not approving the drawings. And so ultimately what is finished, they say, yes, that's what I want.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Question. I just did not follow. During you explained about the pre-registration and expression of interest, it's kind of like
So pre-registration would mean companies from time to time, and sometimes some people leave it open, you register who you are and you go through a pre-qualification process to be on a list of preferred
like the
providers.
minimum requirement.
Preferred providers. So if you're a consulting engineer, let's say you say, as a designer, I wish to be on the preferred designers list. So you go through all of the checks of your insurances, you demonstrate your experience, you demonstrate your capability, and you get approved to do certain works. And so the client says, we think you're able to do those works, you've demonstrated to me that you're of the right quality of workmanship, you can go on my pre-registered list. And so then they sometimes invite people only off their pre-registered list, or sometimes they'd actually only invite the top 2 or 3 people off their list and say, I'm giving you the work. Where the other one they advertise and say, if you're interested in doing work, you put your hand up now for this job, not just for any job.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. Thanks.
That's all right?
My question will be very serious, but the first year was a master of engineering.
So how did you get into the subject?
I'm chemical engineering with
So in the first year you shouldn't be in the subject at all.
the second year, because my exempted for handling forms not treated.
So that means you're in your...
My question is, many places are it goes very well, and during your class, I can't follow you and I can't understand.
So you're probably better to go back to chemical engineering because we'll be using lots of... This subject doesn't cover chemical engineering, other than contracts are somewhat relevant.
My program is Master of Engineering with business.
So this should be taken in your last year of your masters.
It should be 3 years, but my program is 2 years because I have been
So you've studied here at Melbourne for 1 year already?
No.
So you should take it in your last year of your studies.
You mean this course is only hard for me?
I would think so. Yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Because during the class I can't, I don't know some terms.
So if you can defer to next year, you'd be better off because your English will be much higher standard. Because this is the sort of subject, whilst you can read some of it, it takes a lot of interpretation to get to the right standard. Even a lot of the Australian-born engineers in New Zealand, the students, will also have trouble because they haven't done this work before either.
Yeah, I'm from China and I didn't engage in any this kind of subjects. And all of my classes on hot engineering
Well, this is about engineering, except
science.
it's a commercial end of engineering. So if it's easy for you, you can talk to Jay. She speaks Mandarin, and so you can talk to her if that's easier for you. That's no problem. But yes, you're right to recognise that it will be difficult. It's not impossible, but yes, there's a level that you have to come up to. Yeah. Okay. So talk to Jay. You can talk in Mandarin, no problems. So did I email you back? And so then usually you can take that and they should accept it at one stop or whatever to allow you to enrol. As an elective, because you're an exchange student, aren't you? So long as your home university accepts it as an equivalent or whatever. Yeah. So long as, usually with what I've sent you, that should be sufficient. So in the School of Engineering, we still have some officers who deal with exchange programs. If you're having difficulty with enrolment, just email them, you probably know who they are. And click.
I have my question is there a very slow response? I want to continue with the course. Can I maybe get an election via or do I just need to speak to somebody and ask if they can download from the LMS?
So it's difficult for me to do it in other ways because it's sort of like 220 people and alike. How long do they think they'll take you to get into the system? So it was a couple of weeks ago you said that, wasn't it?
I was, yeah, but I don't know. I really tried that. I think a week.
If it's still trouble, I can get you in as a guest, I think, but it's pretty awkward, but we can try that.
Okay, so
So I'd email the exchange lady, I think it's a lady, or man, whoever it is, they're going to be communicating with it, say that you've got approval to do this, and it's all, but it's you're having difficulty getting through the system, is there something they can do? Have you got another email besides your university email?
yes,
Like a Gmail or
I use my university also.
yeah, I can't log you in as a guest as a university person though. So you have to,
I have another email, it's fine. So let's then first I'll try to.
so if you've got a different email, I'm pretty sure I can get you in as a guest viewer.
Then I can also prepare the.
But I'm not sure. I think that'll create problems though, like getting into the tutorial group and all that sort of stuff. So, but we can do that to get you a little bit of that content, but it still won't solve all the problems.
That would be perfect. Let's do first contact the engineer.
Yeah, but send me an alternate email because we can put it on.
You also do it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
because we can do that and put you in as a guest, but it won't pop up everywhere though.
Okay, we'll see.
All right. Okay.
Hello, how's it going? So now you have to put up with it in the class too.
It's really good because it's helping me like more about just confirm everything, but I'm not too sure about
Yeah.
this anyway, so I'm interested in job like this. But I was just wondering for the security clearance.
That's right, that's right. I guess you want to have fundamental understanding of what it is like to do the technical part, but it's not really what it is. Yeah, so I work twice a week during the semester, so I was just juggling. I was doing one subject less.
It's not impossible to have lots of Chinese students in the
Yeah, they kind of
Where you struggle, if I'm honest, is when it comes to sitting there 2 hours down yourself, with no time free, understand all the words and all
So I
that.
had a mentor. Do you know how many people are?
You'll be okay with the class exercises, you'll be able to read the notes because we've got good notes in this subject.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have it?
but you'll miss something that will be hard. That's not impossible, but it will be hard.
Okay.
And
Because I'm
you
going
have to
to
probably lower your expectations of what your final grade would be to probably somewhere if you're a really good student, which you probably are, you'll find more.
Okay, yeah.
That will be the reality.
Great seeing you.
If you're going with your eyes open, it's a good course, you won't regret having done it, but you will, as English is a second language, if it's the first one, there'll be work, yeah. Yeah, but,
Part of the term.
yeah, when John McMillan comes in, he'll be worse than me. Because
My girl, I just took the English test as well. I'm an international student. And my girlfriend, she's Australian, and she's just like, yeah, English is better than mine. And I was like, yeah. Like the level of these English tests is quite high to get permanent residency, if I was surprised.
well, on a subject like this one, you will need that.
No, absolutely. So that's
Because it's all about the subtlety of the language, which is why you're right to identify that. Not impossible. And I would be very surprised if you put yourself at risk to fail if you participate. But nonetheless, you won't do as well as you might want. That's the truth of it.
but you learn.
Yeah, you'll learn a lot.
That's
You'll find it's very useful, but you won't. Depends where you want to take it.
I got a small technicality that I just want to clarify. The work groups, what is the size limit? Is it 5 or is it 6? 6. All right.
Yeah, we prefer 5, but often go 6 just because that's how it works out.
Beautiful.
If you can find 5, I won't put anyone into the group. So
Okay.
like if you have 4, I have to, I may allocate 1 or 2.
Okay. Yeah.
Like if you got 5 and you're happy with 5.
Right now I'm talking to, we're on a 5 and we're seeing if we can get this one friend.
So you get a 6 that you couldn't say, oh, but I need 2 extras.
No. Okay, cool. Fantastic. Cool. Cheers.
Right. So have a think about it. You've got lots of support. So this is a subject where we do give lots of support, but nonetheless it doesn't take away from the issues you identify. All right? But you won't be alone, because 90%